Okay, hello, good morning everyone. My name is Khairul Walik and today I would like to present my thesis proposal, which is titled Digital Comics for Enhancing Vocabulary of the Second Semester Students of the University of Mataram. So the first one is introductions, which includes the background of the study. So vocabulary is one of the most essential component in English language learning. Without sufficient vocabulary knowledge, students will face difficulties in understanding, reading text, listening materials, and even expressing ideas in speaking and writing. So in other words, vocabulary plays a fundamental role in students' overall language proficiency. However, in the context of EFL learnings, many students still have limited vocabulary mastery. This condition affects their ability to comprehend academic texts and participate actively in classroom activities. And one major cause of this problem is the use of conventional teaching methods that focus mainly on memorizations of words lists. And these methods often present vocabulary without meaningful context, which makes students easily forget the words they have learned. And therefore, there is a need for more effective and engaging learning media to support vocabulary learning. The second one is the research problem. So based on the background of the study, several research problems can be identified. The first one is many second semester students at the University of Mataram still experience difficulties in mastering English vocabulary. And these problems limits their ability to understand text and express idea accurately. The second one is vocabulary instructions is still dominated by conventional teaching methods that are less interactive and less contextual. As a result, students tend to feel bored and unmotivated during vocabulary learning. The third one is although digital learning media have developed rapidly, their use in vocabulary instructions at the university level is still limited. And finally, there is a lack of empirical studies that specifically investigate the effectiveness of digital comics in enhancing vocabulary mastery among university EFL students. Okay, next moving into the research questions. So in order to address the problem that have been mentioned, this study is guided by 3 research questions. The first research question focuses on whether the use of digital comics has a significant effect on students' vocabulary mastery. The second research question aims to examine whether there is a difference in vocabulary mastery between students taught using digital comics and those taught using conventional teaching methods. And the last research question seeks to determine the extent to which digital comics can improve students' vocabulary mastery after the instructional treatment. Now moving into the research objective. So in line with the research questions, this study has 3 main objectives. The first objective is to investigate the effect of using digital comics on the vocabulary mastery of second semester students. The second one is to compare the vocabulary mastery of students who are taught using digital comics with those who are taught using conventional teaching methods. And the third objective is to determine how much students' vocabulary mastery improves after the implementation of digital comic as a learning medium. Now, there is a definition of key terms. So, to avoid misunderstanding and ambiguity, several key terms used in this study need to be clarified. The first one is vocabulary mastery. Vocabulary mastery refers to student ability to recognize, understand, remember, and appropriately use words in different contexts. And there are also digital comics. So digital comics are instructional materials presented in digital form that combines image, written text, and narrative elements to convey meaning. The last key terms is enhancing. Enhancing refers to the process of improving students' vocabulary mastery as a result of instructional intervention used in this study. And now we're moving into the chapter 2 literature review. The first one, there is a first variable, digital comics. The first variable of this study is digital comics. Digital comics are a form of technology-based learning media that integrate visual illustration with written text. In language learning, digital comics present vocabulary through dialogues and storylines, which allows students to understand word meaning based on context rather than memorization. And in addition, the visual elements in digital comics such as characters and setting help students infer meaning and remember vocabulary more effectively. Because digital comics are accessed through digital devices, they also support flexible and independent learning. There are also the second variable, which is vocabulary mastery. Vocabulary mastery does not only refer to knowing the meaning of words, but also include knowledge of word form and word use. It involves both receptive vocabulary, which relates to understanding words in reading and listening, and productive vocabulary, which relates to using words in speaking and writing. In this study, vocabulary mastery is measured through students' performance on vocabulary tests administered before and after the treatment. The next one is the theoretical framework. This study is supported by several learning theories. The first one is multimedia learning theories, which explain that students learn more effectively when information is presented through verbal and visual channels. The second one is the dual coding theory. It states that information processed through visual and verbal representation is more likely to be stored in long-term memory. In addition, contextual vocabulary learning theory emphasizes that vocabulary is better learned when words are presented in meaningful context. And digital comics applies these theories by combining visual image, written text, and contextualized narratives in vocabulary learning. Now we're moving into the chapter 3, research methodology. The first one is research design. This study employs a quantitative research approach using quasi-experimental design. The research involves two groups, namely an experimental group and a control group. Both groups are given a pretest to measure their initial vocabulary mastery, and the experimental group receive vocabulary instruction using digital comics, while the control group is taught using conventional teaching methods. And after the treatment, both groups are given a post-test to measure the improvement in vocabulary mastery. The second one, there are population and sample. The population of this study consists of second semester students of the English education program at the University of Mataram, and the sample is selected using purposive sampling by considering class availability and similarity in students' English proficiency levels. And two intact classes are chosen, with one class assigned as the experimental group and the other one as the control group. Moving into the data collection method, the data in this study are collected through testing procedure. First, a vocabulary test is administered to both groups to identify students' initial vocabulary mastery. Next, the experimental group receive vocabulary instruction using digital comics over several meetings, while the control group receive conventional instructions. Finally, a vocabulary post-test is administered to both groups to measure students' improvement after the treatment. The fourth one is instruments of data collections. The main instruments used in this study is a vocabulary test. The test consists of multiple choice and matching items designed to measure word meaning, word form, and word use. To ensure the quality of the instruments, content validity is established through expert judgment, and the reliability of the test is measured to ensure consistent result. The last one is the data analysis. The data obtained from pre-test and post-test are analyzed using statistical technique. Descriptive statistics such as mean and standard deviations are used to describe students' vocabulary scores. Before hypothesis testing, normality and homogeneity tests are conducted. Independent sample t-tests and paired sample t-tests are used to determine the effectiveness of digital comics. I think maybe that's all from me. Thank you for your attention. Good morning.